You guys hear me? Awesome. That was a cool introduction. Nobody's ever used my book before, so thank you for reading it. Didn't waste my time on that one. Cool. Got some laughs off the jump. You know, I was on my way this morning to the airport in Atlanta, and I was thinking about like an icebreaker, because you always have to have an icebreaker, and thankfully that one worked pretty good. But I'm from Ohio, and so I was like, the only thing I could think of was like the OH thing, and I knew that somebody probably already did it today. If not today, they'll do it tomorrow, and it's like really played out and annoying. So I didn't want to do that, and I'm glad I don't have to, because something happened this morning, and learned a little bit about myself, and I wanted to share this lesson with anybody else, especially those who are married. I was in the security line, and I bought the ticket. My wife has a friend who lives here in Lansing, and it's her best friend from college. We live down in Georgia, so hasn't seen her in a while. She was coming up here to surprise her friend, and we're in line at security, and we're getting ready to check out, or we're just getting ready to go through. Plane is already boarding. We're going to be late. I'm going to miss my flight. I texted Annie and I said, I don't know what's happening. Security is standing still. I don't know if I'll make it. And we get up there, and then they ask for my son's boarding pass, my son who is 10 months old. And I'm thinking to myself, why does my son need a boarding pass? He's 10 months old. You have to buy a lap seat ticket for your baby. I did not know that. I mean, it's free, but you have to have that. And so, I did what every not very smart man would do. And I gave my car seat base and all the baby things to my wife, and I said, you have to go and get his boarding pass. I've got to get on this plane. And that went over as well as you could imagine. And even the security lady at TSA, I mean, they're already bad enough, right? Especially Atlanta TSA. And she was like, oh, he just gave his stuff to his wife and made her go to the ticketing. And I'm like, yes, I did. I swear this was not like a selfish natured like response. So I went through security. I texted my wife. I called her. She was not handling it well. In addition to this, she was at the Megan Maroney concert last night with my daughter. So she also was running on about an hour or two of sleep. Yeah, perfect storm. And so, whatever. She ended up getting the 9:30 flight. I flew on my own. She came in after me, and thankfully I was smart enough to remember that she does love a venti iced horchata shaken espresso. And so lesson there is, if you do leave your wife behind at the airport and she has to board a separate flight with a 10-month-old baby carrying her bags, get her a coffee, okay? Get her a coffee. Okay, there we go. There is the icebreaker. Now that you all have laughed, and some of you probably have some ill feelings towards me, I'm going to try my best to make you cry.
Did she have your daughter too?
She did not have my daughter. My daughter was she's probably still sleeping at this point. They were up all night at the concert. So, with all that being said, yeah, my name is Seth Gale. I'm a I don't know what you call me anymore. Motivational speaker. I don't know, keynote. I don't know what any of this means. I just get up here and I share my story to try to help other people overcome a lot of things. And particularly for this audience, is to help you all understand the impact that you all have. I was born and raised in Northwest Ohio in a small town called Lima. It's right on 75. My mom had me and my two sisters back to back to back. I think she was 17, 18, 19 by the time all three of us were born. And as you can imagine, a young mother trying to raise three kids on her own, it was pretty tough. And she was trying to do that because my father, when I was roughly about this age in this photo, maybe a little bit older, he had gotten into a fight with my mom. My mom and my dad were like fire and gasoline. They weren't a good mix, but they always found their way together. And unfortunately, it was my whole life has been a he said, she said. And last year I actually found out that my father was actively trying to kill my mother. They got into an argument. My mom went into the kitchen to protect herself, pulled out a knife. My father then took the knife from her, slammed her on the ground, proceeded to stab her multiple times in the head. So he was given a prison sentence for that. I don't know how long he was in prison. All I know is that I just did not know my father growing up. I don't have any memories of me and him as a baby or as a kid, as a young man. I don't have any of those memories. I have pictures. There's a couple pictures of me and him, but that's about all I have. So at a very young age, my mom, being basically a teenager, was raising 3 kids, and we lived in apartment buildings. We were bouncing around different places. She had to do what she had to do as a single mother, so she was working a lot of times, which left me and my sisters unsupervised. I was the middle child. I have my older sister and my younger sister. And around 5 years old, I remember there was an apartment complex we lived in. I guess you guys are more familiar with this area than most places I speak. So it was Cridersville, which is near Lima. And we were in this apartment complex. And with my mom being gone all day, we would do what kids typically do. We kind of get into things, dig through the house, whatever. We were curious and we were left alone. And unfortunately, at just like 5 years old, me and my sisters, we found my mother's porn collection. And she had like DVDs or VHS tapes, whatever it was. And we found that and we began to watch it. At just 5 years old, I was watching these like full-blown porno movies, videos, whatever you want to call them. And as you can imagine, it's rather compelling for a young mind to kind of see what that is and see what's going on. And it really twisted my perception of what love was, what intimacy was, what bodies were, what sex was. I had no idea what any of these things were that I was watching, but I was exposed to it. And thus, I had this immediate interest, or not an understanding, but maybe a curiosity of it all. In addition to that, we would frequent different babysitters' homes. So we would bounce around from different babysitters' homes. And one of the babysitters that we would go to often had several boys at the house. And we would stay with these people anywhere from a day to 3 days to a week, sometimes 2 weeks. And during these times, my mom would always tell us that she had to go, and her words were, I have to get my shit together. Once I get my shit together, I'll come and get you guys, and we'll all go get our own apartment. These things would happen all the time as a young man during my youth. And at this babysitter's home that had multiple boys, one of the boys was, he was a teenager. I don't know how old he was. All I know is that he looked like a man, and I did not. I vividly remember the only, I guess, distinction that I could make between me and him, or as far as like age goes between me and him, was that he looked like a man and I didn't. And what I mean is, he would take me up into his bunk at night, and he would expose myself to him, and then vice versa. It was confusing. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I was just kind of partaking in it because you're a kid and you're vulnerable and you just don't know what's happening. We ended up actually reporting that. I told my grandma about that, and my grandma went to their family, and they had the typical response of like, my kid wouldn't do that, my kid didn't do that. And then that family basically shut out my grandparents and didn't want to talk to them, didn't want to be a part of them. I'm sure you understand where all that goes and how that happens in a lot of families. So at 5 years old, 6 years old, again, I was being exposed to porn, and then being, I guess you could call that, I don't know what you would call that, molestation or whatever in some capacity at such a young age. Around this time too, my mom, she was dating different men all the time. So there was always different men coming in and out of my house. There would be times where we'd come home and she would brag to us, me and my sisters, about how she had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend did this, and there's this hole in this wall, and there's this broken glass, or there's broken plate. There was just like a lot of violence and a lot of just very toxic lifestyle habits in our home. And my mom would often brag about these things, and she would talk to us about these things. And I've recently come to learn that I believe the term for this is, what's it called? Now it's gone. There's that hour of sleep that I had. Emotional incest is what it's called. Emotional incest. And it's the offloading of your emotions or of the trauma or the things that you're going through. It's the offloading of that onto your children in an attempt to make them more mature and make them understand what's happening. And in reality, it doesn't do that. It just stresses the child out. It's like fear-mongering for a child, basically. It's telling the child that every room you go into, there are going to be men who are predators. That's not a safe and healthy thing to tell a child. There's other ways to navigate those conversations. And my mom, she just didn't have the tools to navigate those conversations appropriately. And so that's what she would do for me and my sisters in an attempt to make us grow up and to make us more mature and to make us able to handle ourselves. She would talk to us about all of her boyfriends, and she would talk to me about my father, who was, a POS and a deadbeat and a loser and a convict and all these, negative connotations that I would have associated with my father because of what my mother had said about him. Regardless of what she said about him, that was my father, and I knew he existed out there somewhere. I just didn't understand what was going on, other than what my mother had told me. Around probably 6 or 7 years old, I can remember just a random day my mom had suggested that we go and see my father. And this is really the earliest memory of my father that I have. I think I was about 7 years old. And I was like, yeah, let's go see him. Like, what's going on? And he was in prison still, or the jail, or wherever he was at. And my first memory as a young man was going to the jail to go see my father. I remember walking into the hallway, going down you walk into this room, and then there's all these cubicles, and there's the plexiglass and the black phones on each side. And I remember going in there and sitting down as me and my mom and my 2 sisters. And, all the inmates come in, and I know who my father is immediately. And I don't know if it's because I've seen pictures or whatever, but I know who he is immediately. And he sits down. He's got really jacked up fingers. Like, his fingers are all, they just got cuts, and his knuckles are really kind of fat and like twisted. It looks like his fingers are all broken, basically. He has Ozzy tattooed across his knuckles. That was like his favorite rock star. He has pain and big block graffiti letters tattooed across his throat. He's bald. He's got a skull tattooed on the back of his head. He looks like a man who has spent some time in prison. He looks like a very violent, angry man. He's missing teeth. He just looks angry, violent, like a typical convict. And this was who my father was. And I was actually the first one to grab the phone, and he said something to me. And I don't, he was probably just saying hi or something like that. And I just fell apart, and I couldn't even talk to him. I just fell apart, and I started crying. And it really, I don't know how to explain that feeling other than it's like putting together a puzzle, and you have this one piece that's in the middle, and it's got a hole on each side, and it doesn't fit anywhere. There's one piece that fits in that spot, and that was my father, and I just couldn't have him, and it didn't make any sense to me. And it really hurt. It hurt that I couldn't go and have experiences with him. I think had I not met him at that time, I don't know that I would have felt those feelings. But knowing that he was there and that I couldn't have him, I think it really pulled something out of me as a young man. And I continued to kind of have that desire or that longing for love and fatherhood, and like a lot of young boys and a lot of young girls as well go through when they grow up in fatherless households. So as life would go on, things would start getting worse and worse throughout my youth. Around 9 or 10 years old, my mother started to get more physically and verbally and emotionally violent or abusive. She began kind of the close hand punching and close hand punching and just using a lot of language towards your kids that you generally wouldn't use. I'm going to share some of these stories, and there's a lot of these stories that I'm going to share throughout this presentation that I don't share any of this to shock anybody. These are all things that a lot of you have probably heard before, but I think that there is a way to tell these stories in a respectful way, in an eloquent way, but also really explains the depth of absolute hell that so many children go through. And I think that if we don't recognize that as a society, and especially in the fields that you all work in, but just the common knowledge of the public, I think that these stories are sometimes told, and it's like my mom was mean to me, or this person touched me, or this person hurt me, and there's very little context that's given with that, and so we don't understand how severe those things are. Again, I know that you all in this room surely have an understanding. I share all that to say that I'm not here to shock anybody. I'm not here to tell any crazy stories to kind of elicit any kind of feeling. I'm just here to tell my story as raw and as vulnerable as I can be with you all. If you've read my book, I'm sure you've already seen some of it. I can remember being 10 years old and coming home from school one day, and me and my cousins had walked home from school that day, and we were kind of taking our time, and we were messing around, and we took a little bit longer than what we normally did because we rode the bus. And so we got home an hour or two late, and I walked up to the front door, and I didn't think anything of it. I just figured, like, whatever, my mom, she was mad at me. She didn't know where I was at, and she told me to go up to her room. And I was expecting a whooping. I was fine with that. Like, this was pretty typical stuff. But the tone that she had and the language that she used was not like, where are you at? I was concerned. I was, scared for you. Were you lost? It was, you've been such an inconvenience to me. Like, go to your room, or go to my room. And so I got up there, and I remember bending over her bed and grabbing the blankets, because if you tried to protect her hand, she was just going to keep swinging. So I remember bending over the bed, grabbing the blankets, and just kind of waiting for my whooping. And she had this 2x6 board, had a handle carved in it, had a bunch of holes drilled in it. She was very proud of this paddle that she had, and she hit me with it. And this time was a little bit different. She started spanking me, and within a second, I just knew that this was different. She hit me so hard that I kind of bounced off the bed. I fell to my knees, and then she kept swinging. And I don't know how many times she swung that board. She swung it 4, 5, 6 times, but she struck me across my back the rest of those swings, basically. And I don't remember what that feels like today. I don't remember how bad that hurt. But what I do remember is just how clouded and like painful that room felt. I remember laying there and being hit and wondering, like, why is this happening to me? Why is my mother doing this to me? And I remember looking up at her, and it just in this violent rage as she's doing this. And then when she was done, it wasn't like, I'm sorry, I overreacted, I love you. Her words verbatim were, get the fuck out of here, go to your fucking room. And I crawled to my room, and I laid there for what felt like hours. And again, I wasn't like paralyzed, I wasn't hurt, it wasn't like I couldn't get up, but my heart was truly broken that my mother had just done this to me. And then there was no remorse, there was no consolation afterwards, there was nothing that followed that. It was just, she just struck me down in her room over walking home from school, and then sent me off to just lay there and cry and be miserable by myself. There was another time I was sitting in my bedroom, and I was sitting on the mattress, and my older sister had come in. She had just gotten into a fight with my younger sister. And she's sitting next to me in my bed, and her back is against the wall. My bedroom door is right here. And she's talking to me. My mom walks in, out of nowhere, really kicks the door open, and immediately turns to my sister and, like hammer fist style, starts punching my sister in the face. Again, I'm 10 years old. My sister wouldn't have been older than 11. And I'm sitting here watching my mom punch my sister repeatedly in the face. I remember she had a sucker in her mouth, which was, concerning for me. And watching my sister's head bounce off the wall. And I immediately jumped on the other side of my bed. And I remember, I'm sitting there behind my mattress, looking up at my mother while she's doing this. And again, instead of an apology, instead of I overreacted, I didn't mean to do that, instead of any of that kind of consolation or love or compassion or empathy or whatever you want to call it, instead of any of those things, she looked at me at 10 years old and said, "What are you fucking crying about? Stop being a fucking bitch," is what she said to me. And, during this time, life was getting pretty rough at home. Life was getting pretty bad. My mom was, at this point, there were people in my house every day smoking. And this was, early 2000s. She was in there smoking weed with all of her friends every day. And, 20 years ago, that was like a really big deal if everybody's in there smoking. But they'd always be in there smoking and drinking. I can remember coming home and at this kid right here coming into the stairwell and seeing my older sister in the living room passing a blunt around the room with my mom. And I just remember like 10, 11 years old thinking to myself that I'll never be that person. I knew that one day I would get out of that life and I would grow away from all of those things and do better things with my life. I didn't know how it was going to happen or when it was going to happen, but I knew that that wasn't the life for me, and I wasn't going to be like these people that I had been surrounded by. During this time, a lot of young boys that are growing up in homes like that, they have these outlets. Generally it's kind of gangs or fighting in school or drugs or whatever it is. I didn't have any of those things. I did get into a lot of fights. I did get into a lot of trouble at school and out of school, but nothing serious. My outlet was finding my friends and trying to go somewhere safe. I had a lot of friends that had safe homes, good parents, and I would go there and hang out with them, and they'd feed me, and I'd play video games and sleep over with them, and it was great. One of these kids that I met, for the sake of the story, his name is Jacob. A real kid, fake name to protect his identity. But I meet him. He lives around the corner from me. He was about 15 years old when I met him. I was 10. And Jacob was a bigger kid, older kid, and we start hanging out. We become best friends immediately. Jacob knows that something is going on at home. He knows that I don't have the best kind of life, so he takes me under his wing, and I'm hanging out with him pretty much every single day, going to his house. Like I said, playing video games. He was feeding me, spending the night. He was taking care of me, protecting me, and he was just a great friend. Well, after a few months of hanging out with him, about 3 or 4 months of hanging out with him, I go and I'm over there, and I remember I was in his stairwell, and I'm looking down the stairs, and the front door is right there, and this man walks in, and it's this big guy. He's 6'5", 6'6", he's 380 pounds. He's Hispanic, but he looks very pale. He's a very pale complexion, but you can tell he's Hispanic. And he's got the big aviator-style glasses on, like the Dahmer-style glasses. He looks like a left tackle. Like, he's very big, but he's very imposing. And I'll never forget that. I'm standing there, and he says, "Hey, what's your name?" And I said, "My name is Seth. What's yours?" "I'm Mondo." He's like, "Do you like football?" "I love football." "Do you like video games?" "I love video games." "You like pizza?" "I love pizza." He's like, "Cool, well, why don't you come up to my house this weekend with me and Jacob, and we'll hang out, watch football, play video games, eat pizza, we'll have a great time." And I'm like, "Yeah, let me go ask my mom." So I go down the street, I live right around the corner, and I go ask my mom. My mom says, "As long as you're with Jacob, you're good to go." So I come back. I remember getting into his car. He drove this white Honda Civic. Get in the back seat. There was trash everywhere. There's fast food all over the floorboard, trash everywhere in his car. And I didn't really care. I remember noticing that, but I didn't care. I was a kid, and I was like, whatever, this don't bother me. And we go to this famous chicken place in Lima, which is Lee's Chicken. I make these references because you guys are relatively local. I'm expecting but no. Nope. Anyways, we go to Lee's Chicken. Yeah, hey, they do got good chicken, man. They got good gizzards. All right, but that place traumatizes me. Okay, I don't want to talk about it no more. Just kidding. So yeah, we go to Lee's Chicken, and Mondo gets me a value meal and a large drink and fries and a side and all these things. And I was used to the dollar menu, and I was lucky to get 1 or 2 things, right? If I was lucky. So I'm in the back seat, and I got this drink and food and all these things. And Mondo, my new friend, is driving. I've got Jacob, who's my other older friend, who's 15, big kid. And I'm in the back seat of this car, used to, Bolies and mom and all the things at home. And so I kind of was man, maybe my life is going to turn around. I remember having these feelings this is awesome. I've got these 2 friends. One of them can drive. He's got money. Car had AC. That's a thing, You get in the car, growing up, no AC. You get in the back of that thing. It's 60 degrees. It's dude, this is awesome. And we're driving up 75. We're going up to Bluffton, Ohio. We're listening to AC/DC and Metallica, and we're just kind of being boys and doing things. And I'm thinking man, this is awesome. I have some friends that I can hang out with now and that I'm safe with and whatever. We get up to Mondo's house, and I walk in, and the first thing I notice is a low ceiling, and it was dark. All the windows were completely blacked out. They had either curtains or black trash bags hanging over the windows. There was an AC unit in the back that was full blast. The apartment was 60 degrees. It was really cold in there. And it was really dirty. There was 2 or 3 contractor trash bags right there at the front door. And I walk in, and I look to my right, and there's a couch, there's a chair, there's 2 TVs, a big entertainment center, there's 2 game systems, which my immediate thought was, we don't have to take turns. We can play games, and we don't have to take turns. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm already putting things together. I'm oh yeah, here we go. And we get in there, we're hanging out, we're playing video games. Mondo had a refrigerator in the back that was full of pop and energy drinks. Later that night, he orders pizza for us, and we have a bunch of pizzas. And for that first weekend I went to his house, I didn't go to sleep. I stayed up for 36 hours playing video games, eating pizza, and drinking pop. And the best thing about Mondo's house was there was no rules. If I wanted something, I could have it. If you go to your friend's house, their mom or their dad says you can't have these chips or this pop because that's for us. And so, I was used to the restrictions, and I get to Mondo's house, he's drink whatever you want. You can have whatever you want. I'll go get it. You want it? I'll go get it. And so I'm this is incredible. And truly, it was the best weekend. It was the best weekend of my childhood. I go home, Mondo's dropping me off on a Sunday, And he's like, when do you want to come back? And I said, dude, I'll come back next weekend. Like, I'll come back right away. Like, you say it, I'll be with you. He's like, all right, well, you give me a call Friday. Here's he wrote down his number, whatever. And Friday came around, I talked to Jacob, and Jacob's like, yep, let's go to Mondo's house again. And we start going and I start going with Jacob to Mondo's house pretty much from this point forward every single weekend. And as I got to know Mondo more and more, we started to have a lot of conversations, obviously, as you can imagine. And one of the very interesting things that Mondo would do was he would talk to me like I was an adult and like I wasn't a little kid. And we would have these very deep, philosophical conversations about life and politics and the world and things that were way far beyond my understanding. And he would talk to me about these things, and he would listen to me, and I would give him feedback, and he would say things, and I'd be learning from him. And I think it's interesting because as a parent now, I think one of the things that I try to get people to understand is when your child says something that you've never heard them say before, for me, my spidey senses start tingling because I'm like, hey, where did you learn that? It may not be a big thing, but I certainly have never said that before. And if I've never said that and it sounds kind of, it could be anything. I mean, if my daughter makes a reference about the governor, you're 8 years old. What do you know about him other than what you've seen on TV? And so I try to point that out because I think it was an interesting thing that he had done that made me feel so comfortable around him, and that made me want to talk to him because he would just listen to everything I said. It wouldn't, and we would just have good conversations back and forth about it. And throughout these conversations, I obviously shared more about myself. He would share some about himself, and I told him that I didn't have a father, and my mom was really mean and abusive and violent. And I would tell him about how she would grab me by my face and slam my head against the wall. And I remember having long hair, and she often would grab my hair and slam my head against the wall. And I would tell Mondo about these things that were happening during the week. I was getting bullied at school, but I was a really smart kid. I was a straight A student, but dealt with a lot of bullies. I didn't have any money at home. I was wearing same clothes every day kind of thing. My shoes had holes in them, the whole 9 yards. I was explaining to Mondo just how bad my life felt, or at least was. And Mondo would, whether it was true or not, I'm not sure, but he would kind of reciprocate those same things to me. So he also grew up with a single mother. He also, obviously didn't have a father. His mom was abusive. He had multiple sisters growing up. He was a very smart person, a very smart student, he would tell me. And I believed it because he seemed like a very intelligent man with everything that he knew. And so we really started to build a lot of commonality. And while my mom was getting more and more violent, while my house at home was getting really, really bad, Mondo and his environment and his friendship and the relationship that we had was just seeming better and better and better. The worse things that got at home, the more I wanted to be around Mondo, the more I wanted to be with him. It got to the point where I was calling him multiple times a week, talking on the phone with him, and sharing all of these details with him. It eventually got to where I expressed that I had wanted to kill myself at about 10, 11 years old. I expressed that I thought about jumping out of my window, and that I thought about stabbing myself, and I thought about hanging myself, and I thought about going to the river, and I thought about all of these different mechanisms of suicide. And truly, I believe that the reason why I didn't do it is I was scared of pain. I didn't want to feel the pain with those things. That was my biggest fear. I think if I could have done it or figured out a way of doing it without feeling any pain and certainly executing and following through or whatever, I think I probably would have done it or at least attempted. Either way, I started sharing those feelings with Mondo, and Mondo told me the same thing back to me. He said, Seth, I also think about killing myself. And so Mondo, at 10 years old, was the first person that I had ever talked to my entire life who could understand what I was going through, who understood what it was like to not have a father and all the mom and sisters and suicide and bullying and being a smart person in a world where you just don't know what to do. He was the first person that I could absolutely relate to in every way. He loved video games. He loved all the things that I love. He loved football. So he was just a mere reflection of me. Whether that was, again, all true or by design, I'm not sure. But either way, it worked. And I just became infatuated with him. And truly, I loved him. I loved him as a friend and as a mentor. And he really did begin to mentor me through a lot of my problems at home and in school. And I could call him about anything, and he would talk to me, and he would help me through it. This is one of the things that I think is so interesting about these relationships, for lack of a better word, and it's the honest truth of those relationships. It sucks so bad to admit that the person who ultimately probably violated you in the absolute worst ways was in some capacity a very, very important person in your life. And that is one of the things that it took me a long time to acknowledge that and to recognize that I would not be here today if it was not for Mondo, truly. I would not be the person that I am today if it was not for Mondo. Regardless of the bad things that he did for me, he was the person that I needed when my life was really, really spiraling as far as home goes, as far as with my mother goes. He was the person that I needed. And again, about 3 months into knowing him, my mother, we actually moved into this house, and it's right by the high school in my hometown. And we lived on the left side, and I slept I remember going in that house, and I always got the small room because it was me, and then my two sisters shared a big bedroom. And I remember going into that house and going upstairs, and I walked in, and the room had hardwood floors. The hardwood floors were like cupped and buckled and cracked all the way across, and they will do that when they're exposed to the elements like water and, it's mainly water and moisture. And my flooring was all ruined. I mean, completely across the floor. It was cracked and buckled because there was a hole in my ceiling, in my bedroom ceiling. It was about 2 feet deep and about 4 feet wide. And it was completely exposed to the elements. And I mean, we moved in during the winter, and you could see your breath in the house. And I walk up, and this is really when I kind of lost respect for my mother as a young man, because for so long I defended her. She's my mom, and still to this day I love her. She's my mother. There's this unconditional, feeling with that. But I remember walking in that room and thinking to myself, I can't believe that this is my bedroom. And I could see the attic structure above. There was no insulation, and this was my room. And her solution to that was putting up some plastic to stop the water from coming in. But otherwise, I slept on a little 3-4 inch mattress with a thin little blanket, and I wet the bed every night. And that was my sanctuary, the place that I could go to get away from the life that I was living, to be alone in my own thoughts or whatever. That was the place that I had, was this room with a massive hole in the ceiling, and it was miserable. And when I moved into that house, that's when my mother had gotten addicted to crack and cocaine. So, things just we just keep digging this well, and it just keeps getting darker and darker and darker. And that's where my life was going. At this point now, there were 5, 10, 15 people coming in. They'd walk in the front door, they'd go right to the back, they'd go in the bathroom, and they'd get high all day. And I remember that distinctly. I remember all these strangers would come in. I think I wrote about this in my book, being 10, 11 years old and seeing somebody on my living room couch. I remember coming down there like midnight and seeing somebody just passed out, head tilted back, eyes rolling, shaking, like convulsing, and just, I have no idea what's happening. I know there's hard drugs in play, all of these things, but I was just, it's like inconceivable to imagine how many children live that life. It breaks my heart today, like when I see this little kid, and then I see my own kids, when I see my kids today, I think about myself at that age, and I think about my mother at that age, and how these things just happen generation after generation after generation. But yeah, that was about 3 months into knowing Mondo. My mom had gotten addicted, and we moved into this home, and I started telling Mondo about the addiction as well. And I started going to his house every weekend, and then at some point, it became pretty normal for me to go there by myself. And as I keep going back to his house, eventually it got to the point where I was sitting in his lap, and I believe it was because going over there, it was so cold in his apartment. I remember mentioning I was cold in there, and he said, well, why don't you come and sit in my lap? And again, he's this big guy, I'm this tiny little kid. And so I remember getting up in his lap and sitting on his leg, and it became very normal for me to just go over there and sit on his lap. And even when Jacob was with me, it became normal. Even though this kid is like 15, 16 years old, it became very normal for Jacob to be there and Jacob to kind of witness this. And even with Jacob, I'll say that when I was over there, I remember Jacob going back and sleeping in Mondo's bed with him. because he didn't have a bedroom. It was a big studio apartment, and his bedroom was cornered off with some black curtains. That was it. So there was just some black curtains hanging from the ceiling, and that's where his bed was back there. And I remember seeing Jacob go back there and sleep with him, but I just thought, like, boys sleep with boys on sleepovers. Like, it's not a big deal. I'll sleep on the couch. They'll sleep in the bed, whatever. It didn't occur to me that something might have been happening. So when I started sitting on Mondo's lap, I didn't think of anything. And truth be told, I'd never been held by a man before. I'd never been hugged by a man before. And as a little boy, and as a father today, I'll tell you, picking up my little, how old is he now? 6? Yeah, he just turned 6. Picking up my little boy and giving him a hug and giving him a kiss and telling him I love him. Like, I know how much he loves that, because every night he's like, Daddy, like, come give me a hug first. Come give me a hug before you leave my room, right? I mean, just last night I was with him and he's like, Daddy, can I sit with you? Can I cuddle with you? Can I snuggle with you? He still does this at 6 years old. So to me, that's like a foreign concept, because you don't remember that, right? You don't remember snuggling up to your father. And I'm still balancing of, like, when is that appropriate? This is exactly why this kind of trauma is so debilitating, because as a parent, you're trying to navigate, how do I love my child appropriately, or is this weird, or am I supposed to cuddle with my children? Why are they acting this way? When I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I didn't act this way. So these are like a lot of the thoughts that people like me end up having to navigate as a parent. But Mondo was the first person that I'd ever sat with as a man who held me in his arms, and I remember laying there, head on his chest, big warm teddy bear guy, and I was comfortable and I loved it. And on one of these particular weekends, it was a Sunday, Jacob had left to go get some tacos, and we're sitting there watching football. I'm sitting in Mondo's lap. I was sitting on his left knee. I'll never forget, his left hand's on my left hip, and his hand slips off my hip, and his hand brushes my butt. And he apologizes immediately, and I said, it's not a big deal. I figured, like, if me and you bump each other in the hallway, that's all it is. It's okay. And that's what I said. I said, it's okay. It's not a big deal. And so he put his hand back on my hip and put his hand back on my butt. And he said to me, so this is okay. And right in that moment, I knew what was happening. I knew exactly what he was doing. And I did what pretty much everybody does. I froze. And by freezing, I basically was giving him consent to do what he wanted to do. And he was kind of dipping his hand in the water, and I didn't burn him. And so one thing led to another, and, his hand rested there. And 10 minutes later, 10 minutes later, Jacob, we can hear the gravel turning outside. Jacob pulls in, and he moves his hand away. And at this point, I was like, okay, yes, confirmed. He definitely knew what he was doing. That's not right. And, Jacob walks in, we eat our tacos, we go home. And when I go home, I do what everybody else does as well. I continue to gaslight myself, and that's not what he was doing. Like, it was clearly raining, but I was telling myself it wasn't raining. He didn't mean anything by it. He's not a bad guy. And even if he was, like, I'm getting video games, pizza, pop, I'm getting all of these things out of it, which is an interesting exchange that children will give up, right? Children will give up a lot of things just to feel some affection, some love, just to feel that thing that's missing. They'll just allow a lot of things to happen. And there's this, I don't know if exchange is the right word, but there's this exchange that children have with predators. And the predators know that. I think Mondo definitely knew that I was longing for something, and then he would provide it in some capacity. And that's what began to happen. I went right back to his house, and right back to it. I sat in his lap, and then at that point it became normal for him to put his hand on my butt immediately. And then eventually it became normal for him to put his thumb in my waistband, and to put his finger in my waistband, and to put 2 fingers in my waistband. And then eventually it was 4 fingers, and then eventually his whole hand in my waistband, and then he's under my underwear. And I'll never forget, as you can imagine, like, the feelings of his hands. He had these big, rough, calloused hands. He had long fingernails. I'll never forget what those things feel like on my skin. And there was another time shortly after that. I remember he had called me over to him to sit in his lap, and before I got in his lap, he leaned forward, and he had never done this before. He leaned forward and he grabbed my shorts, and he ripped my shorts off of me. He ripped them straight down, and my underwear as well, so I was completely exposed to him. And I immediately bend down, I pull my shorts and underwear back up, and I started crying. And Mondo consoles me, and he says, "What's wrong? Why are you crying? Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I'm sorry that bothered you. I didn't know that would hurt your feelings, etc." You know, kind of love bombing me, I guess you could say. And he takes me in, and he's holding me. He's like, "Seth, you don't ever have to be embarrassed around me. Like, I love you. You know, I care about you. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings." And as I have reflected on this, I think it's very interesting. I think it's a very interesting, like, tactic or grooming technique. And the limited knowledge that I have about this kind of stuff, what I've come to like reason with in that particular scenario was that he knew he could hurt me, he knew he could embarrass me, or he could do something to test it, and he was the only person there to protect me. And so he like violated me by ripping my clothes off, embarrassed me, and then he was the only one there who could make me feel better about myself, make me feel loved or accepted or whatever. And I think that was like part of the game that he was playing, was to basically hurt me, but then also be the only person there to help me. And so it kind of created this dependency from me to him. And it kind of created this like, oh, he hurt me, but also he didn't mean to. You know, he's not going to do it again. He's apologetic. You know, he's not trying to be mean. He thought it was funny. Whatever reasoning you have, I think it was just an interesting thing that happened. And I think it worked because I felt like he did love me, and he told me that, and I began to tell him that I loved him. And as the years would go on, he kind of slowly rounded the bases, for lack of a better phrase. He was slowly rounding the bases. Every weekend I would go up there, it was slowly just slowly kind of making things happen. And you know, about 12 years old, I go to his house and we go back to his bed and we're laying in his bed, and he started to put his head on my chest, and then he started working his head down my body, and he would compliment me about my body, my young body, and he would just say these like weird things about me. And he was slowly moving his head down, and then he begins to perform oral sex on me, and I was 12 years old. And I'm laying there, and he's doing what he's doing, and I'm just kind of a lot of emotions, you know. I'm trying to process what's happening and figure out what's going on. I mean, I know it's happening, but it's just terrifying, and it's disgusting, and it's crazy. And while he's doing this, my body does what it's supposed to do, and I end up having my first orgasm at 12 years old. And he looks up at me after he's done, and he says to me, "Did you enjoy that?" Yes. That's what I tell him. Yes. What else am I supposed to say? Yes. And then in that moment, he said one of the like most haunting things I've ever heard in my life, which was, "Before I die, I'm going to fuck you." Is what he told me at 12 years old. And next day rolls around, he takes me home. I get on the bus Monday morning. My friends are talking about their weekend, and I'm in the back of the bus. "Hey, Seth, what's going on? Like, what'd you do this weekend?" And I put a smile on, and I just keep showing up. I just keep showing up. You know, around that time, my mother was arrested for a few charges, but basically she had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend in the bathroom, stabbed him over some drugs, set his stuff on fire in the front yard, and so she was taken away. This all happened right in front of me as well. At 12 years old, I remember watching her in the back of that car getting taken away from me and not knowing what was going on. And for about 6 months, I bounced around a bunch of different houses. I was basically homeless, but I was living with a cousin. Then I went and lived with my dad for a moment and was getting into a bunch of trouble. Eventually ended up at my grandparents' house. My grandparents were really, really good people. I eventually ended up at my grandparents' house, and when I get there, my sisters, they were already there. They had been there for some time, but when my mother was taken away, my sisters bounced around as well. They went different places, I went a different place. My sisters were at my grandparents' house when I got there. And when I got to my grandparents' house, I kind of had that same feeling of like, oh, my life is going to turn around now. Like grandma and grandpa have us, and they're going to protect us, and they've got money, and they've got cars, and we're going to have clothes, and life is going to be great. And within a week or two, my mom had convinced, or I'd say manipulated, my sisters to move back in with her. So my grandma fulfilled their wishes and took my sisters to go back and live with my mother in a house that had no utilities. And I stayed with my grandparents. My grandma asked me if she wanted me to, or if I wanted her to adopt me. I said yes. And after I was with my grandparents for about a week or two, I told them about this friend that I had. And I said, hey, I've got this friend, Mondo, and I want to go hang out with him. And a lot of people, when I tell this part of the story, they're so confused. They're like, why would you go back to his house when you don't need him anymore? Like, you have your grandma and grandpa, you have people to protect you, you have a safe place to be. Why would you go back to that place? Which I think is a great question, and I think needs to be answered by as many people who can possibly answer it. And you know, what's crazy about this is right before I moved in with my grandparents, I was with a family, and I remember being on the phone with Mondo, and I told Mondo, because I hadn't been to his house in like 2 or 3 weeks, which was like a record basically. And Mondo was telling me about how much he missed me. And I said, Mondo, I don't need you anymore. I have a family now. I have these people that are taking care of me, and they had sons and daughters. And I said, these people love me and they're taking care of me. I don't need you every weekend like I did. And he said to me, what do you mean you don't need me anymore? Like, what am I supposed to do? Seth, you're the only thing that matters to me. Like, I love you. You're the only thing that matters to me in my whole life. If I don't have you, like, he was threatening to kill himself. And at 12 years old, I don't know how you navigate that conversation intelligently. And I remember him telling me all these things, and the whole time I'm in my head like, excuse my language, but what the fuck is wrong with you? I'm 12 years old. Leave me alone. And instead of saying any of those things, I said, okay, I'll be there this weekend. I said, come and pick me up. I'll be there this weekend. And I keep going back. And so furthermore, when I get to my grandparents' house, and I really do have safety. My grandparents were great people. My grandma had her own business. My grandpa retired from Ford. And you know, they knew what happened to me when I was 5 because I had told them. And so when I told them that I had this friend, they said, well, who is that? I said, his name's Mondo. He's like 32, 33 years old. And immediately my grandma was like, no, we're not doing that, you know? And I'm like, no, like, trust me, he's fine. Trust me, he's fine. And I said, Jacob even knows him. Jacob knows him. And my grandparents knew Jacob. And so they said, okay, well, we want to meet him. And so Mondo puts on his best 5XL red t-shirt, takes a shower, comes to my grandparents' house, gets out of the car, walks up to the front door like it's prom night, pops the door open, smells like Old Spice, shakes my grandparents' hands, makes them laugh, and boom, he's back in the saddle. And there was so much of me in that moment that was like, please don't let this happen. And it did. And I defended him, and I protected him. And I told my grandparents that he wasn't the person that they think that he is, and that there's nothing wrong with him. And Mondo went in there and told him, yeah, I know Seth, I know his life, I know things have been really hard for him, and I'm just trying to help him out. I know what it's like to kind of grow up like that. And so my grandparents, they were caught in the trap as well. And it's not just this child who's being manipulated, but it's the family as well. I mean, statistically speaking, right? It's in the household. 78% of the time it's in the immediate house. Over 93% of the time it's in that immediate circle of trust. So Mondo is literally the epitome of a wolf in sheep clothing. And about 6 months after I moved in with my grandparents, the adoption paperwork goes through. I turned 13 years old. I remember it being around my birthday, and it was a big deal. And I get off the bus on my birthday. It's like the first day of school pretty much every year. Get off the bus, and all these people are in my driveway, and they threw me a surprise birthday party. First time that's ever happened in my life, I'm pretty sure. I was super excited. You know, grandma and grandpa, my dad was even there, a couple of my friends, a bunch of family members, and Mondo. It's really interesting because I had known Mondo now for about 3 years, and this whole time I had been going to his house, being a part of his family, going to his family gatherings. I went to his Christmases, his Thanksgivings, Memorial Day, 4th of July. I went to all of his events. His whole family knew me. In fact, his mother, first time I met her, told me that I was too pretty to be a boy. And Mondo would say that to me all the time while he abused me. And of all the times I went to go hang out with him and his family, nobody ever questioned anything, to my knowledge. Nobody ever asked me, is something going on? Nobody was ever curious that their 36-year-old brother is hanging out with a 10-year-old boy who does look like a little girl. And So now the tide had kind of turned where Mondo was now in my home with my family, and he was actually coming to my Christmases and my Thanksgivings, and my grandparents knew him, and they trusted him, and they loved him. I mean, everybody loved him. He was a funny, big guy, and so it's really interesting. But around that 13-year-old age, I was up at his house again, and excuse me, he would do this thing over the years where he would punch the wall behind him. And he would punch the wall, and I'd be out there playing video games. And I remember the first time it happened, he punched the wall, and I could hear it, boom, boom, boom. And I went back there, and I asked him, I said, what's wrong? Like, what's going on? Like, what's happening back here? And when he did that, he pulled me into bed, and he would sexually abuse me. And so whenever that knocking would happen, it was like being called to hell, basically. And I remember 13 years old, sitting there playing video games, and I hear it, and my stomach drops, as it always would, because I knew it was kind of time to pay my dues, make that exchange. And I went back there, and this time was a little bit different. There was like this foam pad sitting on his bed, and he was sitting up, which he never was. Did I just turn off my, no, okay, we're good. He was sitting up, and he never was. And so he then pulls me, he stands up, he pulls me into him, and he turns me around, and he pushes me into the bed. And I remember walking forward and my knees kind of hitting the mattress, and very much like walking the plank is kind of how this feels. Drop to my knees. I'm on my hands and knees. I can feel his legs come up behind me, touch my feet. There was a jar of Vaseline that sat next to his bed that I had heard so many times, that little pop of the lid. And to this day, I still remember what it looks like, the deep scoops that his fingers would make. And I remember hearing that Vaseline jar pop open. He puts the Vaseline on me, and he began to rape me. And I had resisted this for so long. He had attempted this so many times, and I had always said no. It hurt too bad. This, whatever reason or excuse that I had to not let it happen, I'd always resisted it, and for whatever reason, I gave up, and I gave in, and he did what he did. And when he was done, he took a towel, he wiped me up, I walked to the bathroom, I sat down on the toilet, and I'm sitting there, and I just got my head in my hands, and I'm crying, because I'm just thinking to myself, why is my life this way? Why don't I have a mother, a father? I don't have any friends. Like, why is my life going like this? I was so confused. I thought I might have had HIV or AIDS or some sort of disease. I can't tell anybody now, because now people are going to think I'm gay. They're going to think that I've enjoyed this. I've gone back to his house. I don't know what to do at this point. I mean, I was going through a spiral of emotions that no 13-year-old boy should ever have to experience. And after sitting there for a few moments in this dimly lit, yellow, grimy bathroom, I got up, walked out, put a smile on, and I just kept playing the game. I just kept showing up. And that goes on for about 2.5 more years. And literally every single weekend, I mean, like clockwork, I was going to his house. If there's 52 weekends in a year, I was there about 45 of them. And every single weekend he would abuse me. And I was about 15 years old, or excuse me, I was about a month away from being 16 in this photo. And I was up at his house one weekend. I had a younger friend that was with me. And my younger friend was having a bad day, and Mondo made a comment towards him, and he said, if you're having a bad day, I could take you back into bed and I could blow you. Mind you, the audacity that this man had, he would abuse me back in that bed 10 feet away from everybody else who was at his house. Because there was a curtain there, I was back there, he would be abusing me while other kids are out there playing video games. And so when he made this comment to my friend, what was so striking about it was the fact that he had said that same exact thing about me in front of other adults. We had other adult friends that we would hang out with and frequent, and he would tell them verbatim, oh, we got to go. I've got to go back and fuck Seth tonight. I've got to go back and Seth is going to do this tonight. And everybody would laugh it off. And I'd sit in this room with all of these adults laughing it off, and in a way, Mondo was basically telling me, do you see that nobody's going to believe you? Nobody believes you. I'm telling people what I'm going to do to you, and they do not believe you, or they don't believe me. So they're not going to believe you. And it's this very powerful control mechanism. And that's what he was doing. And when he made this comment towards my younger friend, I don't know what it is that this little freaking kid had in him, but something stirred up inside of me. And I was like, this is it. I'm not going to let this happen. And I got on the video game and I messaged my friend Jacob, who had introduced me to Mondo, about 6 years prior. And I said, Jacob, I got to talk to you Sunday. And all he said back to me was, okay. Mondo takes my friend back to his bed. I don't think anything happened that night. The following night, Mondo ends up raping me again, amongst other things. And Sunday morning rolls around and I go home. I get home, I'm there for an hour or so. Jacob pulls up and we kind of talked a little bit and we're laughing and joking with my grandma and grandpa. And then me and Jacob would go back into my bedroom. And I'm telling Jacob, I'm just like I am now, I'm pacing back and forth and I'm telling Jacob, like, man, I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time. I just don't know what to say. And I'm so scared because Mondo's like everybody's best friend. Nobody's going to believe me. Like, he wouldn't do that. I'm just terrified. And I cannot say the words. And I'm just telling Jacob, I don't know I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to say this. I've been wanting to say this for a long time. And I'm pacing. And Jacob breaks the silence and he says, Mondo touched you, didn't he? And I just turn and I look at him and I just fell apart and I start crying. And I fall to the floor and I'm punching the floors and I'm, pulling my hair and I'm crying and I'm sweating and I'm freezing. And after a few moments, Jacob breaks the silence again and he says, he did it to me too. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, man, he's my hero. I was like almost 16 and so Jacob was in college. He was partying and drinking and dating all the girls. And like, if you have a father in your life or a man in your life who's like this big, powerful man, it never happens to them. And so I looked at Jacob and I couldn't believe he had gone through it as well. And again, it wasn't about me anymore. It was just about him. And I couldn't believe it. And so I gave him a hug and I'm sitting there crying and he says, what do you want to do about it? He said, do you want to keep it a secret or do you want to report him? I've already dropped enough F-bombs, so I said, fuck it. I said, fuck him, we're going to report him. And so we go out and we tell my grandparents. And as you can imagine, my grandparents are absolutely destroyed. I can still, to this day, I wish my grandma was here to see what I'm doing now, but to this day I can hear her, my baby. And I get up and I hug her and I'm sorry because I freaking told her that she was okay and that he was a good friend and I had defended him to so many people for so long. And she's like, my baby, and takes me in. And we end up calling 911 and they tell us to go down to the hospital and to make the report. And we get down there and there was this, we're in the emergency room and this nurse is talking to me and she's saying, Seth, do you have anything that you've worn to his house recently? Do you have anything that you haven't washed? And I tell her, I said, ma'am, I don't know if I was, really clear enough, but he just did this to me, 12 hours ago, and I haven't showered and I haven't changed my clothes. And I knew to do that because I had seen How to Catch a Predator and I had seen Law and Order and I had seen all these TV shows. And so I knew to keep my stuff on me. And that lady, you could hear the silence in the room. It was just, they were blown away that this little 15-year-old boy had the wherewithal to maintain, I guess, the evidence. And I did. And they politely asked to, remove my clothes and do all the kit and all that good stuff. And they did. And then this police officer walks in, and his name's Chad Couples. And every time he's here, I freaking cry. And so, this guy, Chad, walks in and he starts talking to me. And he's like, Seth, listen, man. He's like, the more you tell me now, the less we'll have to do later. And fortunately enough for us, I was in a position, and for I don't know how, but I was able to tell Chad every little detail about what had happened in the most explicitly raw, vulnerable detail. I gave Chad everything that he needed to go and make this case happen. And sure enough, he drives up to Bluffton, Ohio. Long story short, he gets Mondo to confess out of custody to performing a handful of acts, enough to at least arrest him. They go through the whole proceeding that follows that, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison in 2011. So he was initially charged with 10 felony counts. He received a plea deal, took 4 of them. He got a 10-year sentence. He died 9 years into his sentence, supposedly of a staph infection, whatever. I got that call while I was in Afghanistan that he died, and he's no longer with us. Yeah, sucks for him. Anyways, these are some pictures from his apartment on that day that they made the arrest. This was the jar of Vaseline that was in the the stand next to his bed, and you can see how messy and dirty his apartment was. This was the letter that I wrote when I was 15 years old. I'll read it to you. This is what I wrote for Chad. So it starts off saying, he has been sexually abused by Mondo for maybe 4 to 5 years. The first time it happened, he accidentally hit my butt. He said he was sorry. I said it was okay. So then he said, well, if that's okay, then he grabbed my butt again. This happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. From then on, it slowly progressed from kissing, telling each other we loved one another, to him sucking my penis. Then he guilted me into doing it to him. Then he eventually convinced me to let him stick his penis in my butt. I let him do it. End of report. It's like, this whole letter is really crazy. Particularly the last line, I let him do it. It's crazy that I wrote that. I understand why I wrote it. That's one of the hardest things to live with as a survivor of these kind of crimes, because the fact of the matter is it did happen, and I had so many other options. I could have ran away. I could have stopped going to his house. I could have killed the guy. I could have done a lot of things. I could have reported him earlier, and I didn't. I kept going back, and I did let him do this because I did not move. And I'm not accepting blame or guilt or anything like that, but that is the truth. And that is one of the things that I have come to terms with that I think is very difficult, but I think it's very therapeutic for me, because a lot of times when these things happen, the blanket statement is you were just a child. You were just a child. You were just a child. And while that is absolutely true, I think that there are other things that are true about the situation. And again, it's not to put the blame on anybody. It's not that. But that you were just a child blanket, to me, it feels like we're going to cover this up. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go to that cave. We don't want to open that box. For me, so much of my healing has come from opening that box. I was a child, but also I did go back to his house, and I did protect him, and I didn't run, and I didn't move. And I had said no before, and he respected that. So I could have said no again, and he surely would have respected it again. So for me, a lot of the healing, oddly enough, was like going past that blanket statement of you were just a child to acknowledging the entire situation. And I don't really know what it is about that, but there is a big piece of it that has helped me move on from what happened to me by just processing that and thinking about it and going through that traumatic experience. So whenever I tell my story and I come out here and I share my story, I always want to leave you guys with something other than tears and trauma and a heartbreaking story. I don't want anybody to be heartbroken for me. I don't want you to be consumed by pity and sorrow and whatever. And I would like to leave you all with a challenge. And my challenge from here is that when you walk into a room and you have that child in front of you who is looking for help, is looking for hope, who's looking for just something that says that I can make it, that I can live a good life, that I can be loved, and that I can do good things in this world, my challenge for you is to not be consumed by pity. I don't want you to feel overly pitiful for this child in front of you who has gone through horrible things. What I want you to do is to be inspired by this little freaking warrior who had the courage to come forward and do what they got to do and handle their business. Because this person that you are talking to who walks into your freaking office every day, this person who's coming to you for some help, for some guidance, one day they might become a soldier. You are talking to the next little high school graduate, college graduate, first time in their family. You might be talking to a soldier. You might be talking to somebody who has the opportunity to go to Afghanistan and serve their country. You might be talking to somebody who eventually grows up one day and works so hard at their job that they go on to win national awards. And they go out to Las Vegas for free and get to speak on a stage in front of people who make too much damn money and tell them about what their life has been like to get here. You might be talking to somebody who eventually one day grows up and begins competing in combat sports, begins winning despite the dad bod. That is, I'm on the left, if you can't tell. You might be talking to somebody who grows up and begins to challenge themselves and push themselves in ways that they can't even imagine as a child because of all the things that they've gone through. Just by you having just a little bit of an interaction with them and just by providing just a little bit of hope for them. You might be talking to somebody who grows up and competes in front of their kids and gets to show their kids how strong and powerful their daddy is. You might be talking to somebody who becomes a power lifter and gets to do things in front of their kids so their kids have a good representation of what a father is. You might be talking to somebody who's so freaking traumatized that they might go and run 100 miles. You might be talking to somebody who seriously has the opportunity to make an impact on millions and millions of lives. Just by you showing up and doing what you guys do every day, you are pouring into somebody who just needs a little bit of freaking love. I'm telling you, I ran on nothing for so long, and every time my cup was about empty, somebody like you walked in. Somebody like you walked in and gave me a little bit of, just a little bit of hope. Somebody walked in and gave me a little bit of love to keep me going. And I'm telling you, it's the people like you who are saving lives and creating little warriors. This little spark, it does so much. And they might grow up and they might write a book, and that book might become a bestseller multiple times. They might sell 20,000 copies. They might travel the world. They might share their story to help other people just keep going for one more day. And more importantly than like all of the ultra marathons and the powerlifting and jiu-jitsu and service to country and all these great things and accolades that somebody might have from your little bit of an impact or that little bit of a moment that you have with them, more importantly than all of that, you might be able to show somebody that there's like love. There's love on the other side of this life, that no matter how bad you've been hurt, no matter who hurt you or how long it happened, somebody doesn't care about any of those things, and somebody is going to love you through it. Somebody's going to protect you from those things. Somebody's going to listen to those things, and they might even give you somebody else. Man, it's that 1 hour of sleep. Somebody might give you somebody to love, like a little girl. They will change your freaking world. And if you have one, you're going to have another. Blame COVID for that one. Yep. And then, of course, everything's better in threes. So you're probably going to have another little guy who shows up. Yep. That was 10 months ago. He was born. He's in the NICU. I've been through a lot of shit, but that was hard. And you might have somebody who, has this life and this family and just all of these things that you're looking at right now on these screens. These are the lives that you have the opportunity to impact. I promise you, the people, when they grow up and they end up having this kind of life and they have this family, they will always remember the people who were there when they were at their lowest, when they're at the hardest times in their life, when somebody showed up for them and poured a little bit of love. That's all it takes, is for you to show up and just be that spark for that person and to be inspired by that person. When I see little kids who are going through hell, and I know it, I can see it in them, I know that one day that kid is going to do something incredible, and they're going to reflect on these moments. They're going to reflect on everything that they've gone through when they get to look at pictures like this, when they get to pick their little boy up on the ball field after he wins player of the game. When your little boy's coming out and he's not breathing, but you know he's going to be okay. I reflect on all of the things that I've been through, and I'm so thankful for the people like you in this room. When I come out here and I share my story, I always end these things with a big thank you. And I always say thank you for coming out, for listening to me, for doing what you do. But really, from the bottom of my heart, this is what you guys have. This is the impact that each and every one of you make every single day. My little kids have the life that they have. They have the daddy that they have because somebody showed up for me and somebody did what they were supposed to do. So with all that being said, like I said, I generally will say thank you for listening, but I'm trying to tell you right now, thank you for doing what you all do. Thank you for showing up every day, because the future of our country, of our world, it's in your hands. You have so much of life is impacted by what you guys do on a day-to-day basis. And I want you, and I challenge you to just acknowledge that every single day when these people walk in and they're looking for a little bit of light, they're looking for a little bit of hope. You are that person at the end of the tunnel that they need. That you are it. There's nobody who has loved them like you have the opportunity to love them when they come into you and they come and talk to you. I know this is true because this man right over here, Chad Couples, walked into the emergency room 15 years ago, and I thought about him every single day. Every single day I thought about him. And I wanted to reach out to him, and I wanted to thank him so bad for what he had done for me, for protecting me, for standing up for me. And I had the opportunity, obviously, to do that a couple years ago. And I'll never forget that phone call of just calling him and telling him, Chad, my name is Seth Gale, and I don't know if you remember me, but I'm okay now. And I'm all of these things. And I have a wife, and I have beautiful kids, and I'm writing a book, and I'm sharing my story, and I'm trying to help people, and I want you to be a part of it. I hope that you all get that phone call one day. Even if you don't, as unlikely as that is, understand that these kids are thinking about you. These people are thinking about you. With every little bit of success that they have in their lives, they remember the people who stepped in and helped them at their lowest. I promise you that. So with that being said, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, man. It's a little hot up here. I'm going to turn the AC on.
You got it? Thank you. Thank you, Seth, so much. I can't follow that. So what I can say is that he'll be out here for a book signing, and the networking hour is upstairs in the rock bar. So